The ship fell from the sky like a burning star. Dr. Hye-Jin Park looked up from her morning coffee as the metal craft crashed into the forest 3 kilometers from her research station. Black smoke rose above the trees, and she could hear the distant sound of twisted metal cooling in the morning air. She grabbed her medical kit and emergency supplies. Living alone on New Busan for 15 years had taught her to be ready for anything. The planet was supposed to be empty except for her small research outpost, but space was dangerous. Ships broke down, got lost, or ran from pirates. The crash. Sight was worse than she expected. The alien vessel had torn a long scar through the forest before hitting a rocky hill. Strange purple fluid leaked from the hull, and the metal was bent in ways that hurt to look at. But the ship's design told her everything she needed to know about who was inside, Kethmori. The cat people who ruled this part of space. Hye-Jin had never seen one in person, but everyone knew about them. They were fast, strong, and proud. Their empire controlled dozens of star systems, and they treated most other species like pets or pests. Humans were something in between. Not quite pets, not quite pests, but definitely not equals. She found the first survivor trapped under a piece of hull plating. He was huge, nearly 3 meters tall, with golden fur marked by black stripes. His cat-like face was twisted in pain, and bright blue blood soaked his torn uniform. Captain's marks decorated his collar. "Easy," Hye-Jin said softly, the way she spoke to frightened animals. "I'm here to help." The captain's yellow eyes snapped open. He tried to move, then roared in pain. His right leg was clearly broken, and probably some ribs too. "Human," he growled in accented standard. Do not touch me." "Your leg is broken," Hye-Jin said calmly. She was already scanning him with her medical kit. "And you have internal bleeding. I can help, but you need to let me." "Why?" The captain's eyes were full of suspicion. "What do you want?" "Right now, to keep you from dying." She pulled out a pain injector designed for large mammals. "This will help with the hurt." The captain watched her warily but didn't stop her when she pressed the injector to his neck. His face relaxed as the medicine worked. "My cubs," he whispered. "Find my cubs." Hye-Jin's heart clenched. Cubs meant children. She worked faster, using her portable beam cutter to free the captain from the wreckage. Then she followed his wake, pointing toward the back of the ship. She found them huddled together in what had been the crew quarters. 2 young Kethmori, probably not even teenagers by their species standards. They were smaller versions of the captain, with the same golden fur and black stripes. But their eyes were wide with terror. "It's okay," Hye-Jin said gently. "I'm a friend. Your father sent me." The larger cub, a female, hissed and pushed the smaller male behind her. "Stay back, human. We know what your kind does to prisoners." Hye-Jin sat down slowly, making herself smaller and less threatening. "What's your name?" "I am Velnara of the Swift Claw clan," the female said proudly. "This is my brother Kessatar. We are not afraid of you." But they were afraid. Hye-Jin could see it in the way they trembled, smell it in the air. They were just children, lost and scared. "I'm Hye-Jin," she said, "and I live here. This is my home. Would you like some food? You must be hungry." Velnara's stomach growled loudly, betraying her. Kessatar whimpered softly. "It's not poisoned," Hye-Jin promised. "Look." She pulled out a protein bar and took a bite herself. "See? Safe." She tossed the rest of the bar to Velnara, who caught it with lightning-fast reflexes. The cub sniffed it carefully, then broke off a piece for her brother. "Your father is hurt," Hye-Jin said gently. "He needs medical care. Will you let me take you all to my home? It's safe there." "Why would you help us?" Velnara asked between bites. "Humans and Kethmori are not allies." Maybe not, Hye-jin agreed. But you're children, and you're hurt and scared. That's enough for me. It took 3 trips to get them all back to her research station. The captain, who told her his name was Taemin, was in bad shape. Hye-jin spent the rest of the day setting his leg and treating his other injuries. The cubs watched everything. With huge golden eyes, her research station wasn't much. Just a few connected buildings with a lab, living quarters, and storage areas. But it was warm and safe, with plenty of food and medical supplies. That first night, the cubs slept curled, up next to their father's medical bed. Hye-jin gave them blankets and pillows, but they seemed more comfortable in a furry pile. Why? Captain Taemin asked her quietly. He was awake, staring at the ceiling. We are nothing to you, less than nothing. Why risk yourself for us? Hye-jin looked at the sleeping cubs. Because someone has to, she said simply. Because it's the right thing to do. Because if I don't help, who will? Your people are strange, Taemin said. We were taught that humans are violent, aggressive, that you fight everything, even each other. We do fight, Hye-jin admitted. But we also protect. Sometimes fighting and protecting are the same thing. She checked his bandages one more time. Get some sleep. Tomorrow I'll start trying to fix your ship's communication system. Your people are probably looking for you. But as she turned to leave, Taemin's voice stopped her. Hye-jin, he said softly. Thank you. She smiled. Thank me when you're all home safe. Outside, the alien forest whispered in the wind. Strange. Birds called to each other across the darkness, and in her small research station, a human woman began the long process of turning enemies into family, one act of kindness at a time. The cubs would learn many things in the days to come. But the first lesson had already begun, that sometimes the strongest warriors were the ones who chose to heal instead of hurt. 3 weeks passed like a strange dream. Captain Taemin healed slowly, his broken bones mending under Hye-jin's careful care. The cubs, Velnara and Kessatar, grew bolder each day. At first they stayed close to their father, but soon they began following Hye-jin around like curious shadows. What are you doing? Velnara asked for the 100th time. She was always asking questions, always wanting to know more. Hye-jin sat perfectly still beside a small pond, holding a camera with a long lens. She had been sitting there for 2 hours, without moving. Waiting, she said quietly. For what? Kessatar whispered. He was quieter than his sister, but just as curious. Watch and see, the cubs fidgeted. Sitting still was torture for young Kethmori. Their people were hunters, built for quick strikes and fast movement. Patience was not something they understood. This is boring, Velnara complained. Why don't you just go catch whatever you're hunting? Because I'm not hunting, Hye-jin said. I'm learning. A small splash came from the pond. Hye-jin's camera clicked rapidly as a family of 6-legged amphibians emerged from the water. They were beautiful creatures, with blue-green skin that sparkled in the sunlight. The cubs had never seen anything like them. Moonfish, Hye-jin whispered. They only come out when they feel completely safe. If I had walked up to the pond, they would have hidden for days. The creatures moved in complex patterns, touching each other with their front limbs in what looked like a dance. Hye-jin recorded everything, making notes on her tablet. What are they doing? Kessatar asked, fascinated despite himself. Talking, Hye-jin said. That's their language. Each touch means something different. I've been studying them for 3 years, and I'm just starting to understand. Velnara's ears flicked with interest. You can speak to animals? Not speak. Exactly. But I can learn to understand them. Every living thing has its own way of communicating. You just have to be patient enough to figure it out. The moonfish finished their conversation and slipped back into the water. Hye-jin finally stood up, stretching muscles that had been still for hours. That's it? Velnara said. You sat here for hours just to watch fish talk? Knowledge is power, Hyejin said simply. The more I understand about this world, the better I can live with it, and the better I can protect it if I need to. The cubs didn't understand, but they kept following her. Every day brought new lessons in the strange human way of doing things. Hyejin showed them how she tracked the great mountain cats that ruled the northern forests. But instead of hunting them, she studied their behavior. She learned their patrol routes, their hunting schedules, their social structure. Your people would hunt them, she told the cubs as they watched a massive predator stalk through the trees below. Mine would probably try to drive them away, but I chose to understand them instead. What good does understanding do? Velnara asked. They're still dangerous. Understanding makes them predictable, Hyejin said, and predictable things are less dangerous than unknown ones. She pointed to markings on a tree trunk. That cat marked this territory yesterday morning. He'll be back tonight to check it. If I needed to cross his territory, I'd know exactly when it was safe to do so. Kessatar studied the claw marks with new interest. You could avoid him completely. Or I could find him if I needed to, Hyejin said. Knowledge works both ways. The cubs began to see patterns in everything Hyejin did. She never acted without thinking. She studied problems from every angle before making decisions. When she moved, it was with purpose and efficiency. Your father is getting stronger, she told them one evening. They were sitting around her small fire pit, eating dinner under the alien stars. His bones are healing well. Will our people come for us? Kessatar asked quietly. Eventually, Hyejin said. Your ship's emergency beacon is working now. It will take time for the signal to reach them and more time for them to get here. But they'll come. Velnara poked at the fire with a stick. Will you miss us when we go? The question surprised Hyejin. Over the past weeks, she had grown attached to the curious cubs. Their questions kept her on her toes, and their presence made her small station feel less lonely. Yes, she said honestly. I will miss you both very much. We could stay, Kessatar said suddenly. We could learn more about this place, about your ways. Hyejin smiled sadly. This isn't your world, little one. Your people are your family. They love you and worry about you. You love us too, Velnara said matter-of-factly. We can smell it on you. Humans smell different when they care about someone. It was true. Without meaning to, Hyejin had started thinking of the cubs as her own children. She cooked their favorite foods, told them bedtime stories, and worried when they wandered too far from the station. Love isn't about keeping someone, she said gently. Sometimes love means letting them go home where they belong. That night, Captain Taemin found her sitting alone in her lab, staring at star charts. They adore you, he said, settling carefully into a chair. His leg was still weak, but he could walk short distances now. They're good cubs, Hyejin said. You should be proud of them. I am. But I'm also worried. Taemin's yellow eyes were thoughtful. They're changing, learning things that aren't part of our way. What will happen when we return home? They'll teach others, Hyejin said. Children always do. They'll show their friends and cousins that there are different ways to solve problems, different ways to see the world. Is that what you want? To change us? Hyejin looked out the window at the alien forest she had made her home. I want them to have choices, she said finally. When they grow up, they should be able to choose the best path forward, not just the traditional one. Taemin was quiet for a long moment. Among my people, patience is seen as weakness. But watching you, I begin to understand that it can be a form of strength. The strongest tree is the one that bends in the wind, Hyejin said. And the most dangerous hunter is the one who knows exactly when to strike. Outside, night birds called across the darkness. The cubs slept peacefully in their beds, dreaming of moonfish and mountain cats, and the strange human woman who had shown them that strength could be gentle and patience could be powerful. Tomorrow would bring new lessons. But tonight, an unlikely family rested under alien stars, each learning from the others in ways they were only beginning to understand. The alarm woke Hyajin before dawn. She rolled out of bed and stumbled to her communication console, where red lights flashed urgent warnings across the screen. Her long-range sensors had detected something approaching the outer edge of the solar system. What is it? Captain Taman appeared in the doorway, moving faster than he had since the crash. His broken leg was still weak, but danger had sharpened his instincts. Hyjin's fingers flew over the controls, pulling up sensor data and star charts. What she saw made her blood run cold. Ships, she said quietly. Lots of them. 200, maybe more. The cubs crowded behind their father, still rubbing sleep from their eyes. Are they our people? Velnara asked hopefully. Taimin studied the sensor readings and shook his head. No, these are hegemony vessels, insectoid design. He looked at Hyjin with growing alarm. They're not here by accident. The hegemony was bad news for everyone. The alliance of bug-like species had been expanding aggressively for decades, conquering world after world. They saw warm-blooded species as inferior life forms to be eliminated or enslaved. How long until they reach us? Hyajin asked. At their current speed. 18 hours, Taman calculated. Maybe 20 if they stop to scan the outer planets. Hyjin was already moving, pulling up colony records and communication logs. New Busan was home to roughly 8,000 human colonists, scattered across 3 continents. They had some patrol ships and mining vessels, but nothing that could stand against a hegemony battle fleet. You have to evacuate, Taman said urgently. Get your people off-world before the hegemony arrives. They show no mercy to humans. But Hyajin wasn't accessing evacuation plans. Instead, she was calling up geological surveys, weather patterns, and biological databases. Everything she had learned about New Busan in 15 years of research. I'm not leaving, she said simply. Don't be foolish, Taman growled. This isn't a battle you can win. The hegemony has conquered dozens of worlds. Your small colonial fleet won't last 5 minutes against them. You're right, Hyjin agreed calmly. In a straight fight, we'd lose. So we won't fight straight. She began sending coded messages to research stations and settlements across the planet. Within an hour, replies started coming back. The colonists weren't running. They were preparing. What are you doing? Velnara asked. She had been watching Hyajin work with growing fascination. Applying everything I've learned, Hyajin said. Remember what I taught you about the mountain cats? How understanding them made them predictable? Kessatar nodded eagerly. You learned their patterns. When they hunted, where they went, how they thought. Exactly. The hegemony follows patterns. 2. They're very good at conquering planets, but they always do it the same way. They establish orbital control, land-ground forces at strategic points, and overwhelm defenders with superior numbers and firepower. Taman watched her work with growing unease. You're planning to fight them? I'm planning to make them wish they'd never heard of New Busan, Hyajin said. Her voice was still calm, but something cold and hard had entered her eyes. The cubs have learned about patience and observation. Now they're going to learn why humans are the most feared warriors in the galaxy. She pulled up a 3-dimensional map of the planet's surface. Red dots marked hegemony landing zones, predicted based on standard invasion protocols. Blue lines showed human patrol routes and supply lines. Green areas indicated safe zones where colonists could hide. This isn't how Kethmori fight, Tae-min said slowly. No, Hyejin agreed. Kethmori are honorable warriors. You meet your enemies face to face and prove your strength in honest battle. It's a noble way to fight. She looked up from her planning screens. But the hegemony doesn't fight honorably. They're genocidal invaders who kill children and destroy worlds, so I'm not going to fight them honorably either. The cubs exchanged glances. They had learned to read human emotions over the past month, and right now Yi-Jin smelled like a mountain cat protecting her cubs, dangerous, deadly, absolutely determined. "What can we do to help?" Velnara asked quietly. Yi-Jin looked at her with surprise. "You don't have to help. This isn't your fight." "You saved us," Kessatar said simply. "You fed us, healed our father, taught us new ways to see the world. Now, bad people want to hurt you." "Of course it's our fight." Taemin started to object, but Hyejin held up a hand. "They're old enough to choose," she said, "and I could use their help. Keth Mori's senses are better than human ones. You can see in the dark, hear things we miss, move more quietly than we can." She turned back to her planning screens. "If you're going to help, you need to understand how humans really fight, not the clean battles you see in history books. Real war, messy war, the kind where winning matters more than looking good." Over the next few hours, Hyejin explained her plan. It wasn't pretty or heroic. It was practical, ruthless, and designed to hurt the enemy in ways they wouldn't expect. The cubs listened with growing amazement. This wasn't the gentle researcher who had been teaching them about patience and understanding. This was something else entirely. Something that planned 3 steps ahead and turned every advantage against their enemies. "You're going to use the mountain cats?" Velnara asked in disbelief. "Among other things," Hyejin confirmed. "Remember, I've been studying the local ecosystem for 15 years. I know which plants are poisonous, which animals are territorial, which geological formations are unstable. The hegemony is coming to conquer a planet. I'm going to teach them that some planets fight back." As the hegemony fleet drew closer, the cubs watched their human teacher transform. The woman who had sat patiently by ponds and spoken gently to frightened animals was still there. But now she was wrapped in something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. "Are you afraid?" Kestar asked her as they made final preparations. Hyejin considered the question seriously. "Yes," she said finally, "but not of losing. I'm afraid of what I might have to become to win." She looked at the cubs, and her expression softened slightly. "Whatever happens in the next few days, remember that war doesn't make us monsters. It reveals what we were willing to become to protect the things we love." The first hegemony ships entered orbit just after sunset. As enemy shuttles began their descent toward the planet's surface, Hyejin activated her communication network. "All stations, this is Research Base Alpha," she said calmly. "Operation Yellow Jacket is now active. Make them regret coming to our home." The cubs had learned patience from the human. Now they would learn about the other side of human nature. The side that never surrendered, never forgave threats to family, and turned entire worlds into weapons when pushed too far. The first hegemony shuttles landed at dawn, exactly where Hyejin had predicted they would. The enemy chose flat areas near water sources, places that looked safe and strategic on orbital scans. They had no way of knowing that the human colonists had been preparing those exact locations for months. "Contact in Sector 7, came the report over Hyejin's communication network. 50 enemy troops setting up a forward base." Hyejin didn't respond immediately. She was watching through hidden cameras as the insectoid soldiers established their perimeter. They moved with military precision, following standard protocols that had worked on dozens of conquered worlds. "What are we waiting for?" Velnara whispered. The cub was crouched beside Hyejin in the concealed observation post, her golden eyes fixed on the enemy below. "For them to feel safe," Hyejin replied quietly. "The more comfortable they get, the harder they'll fall." Captain Taemin monitored communications from his position near the backup transmitter. His leg was still weak, but he insisted on helping coordinate the defense. "Hegemony Command is deploying troops to 8 separate landing zones," he reported. "Just as you predicted." The cubs watched in fascination as their human teacher's plan unfolded. Nothing happened quickly, no dramatic charges or heroic battles. Instead, small things began going wrong for the hegemony forces. Equipment started failing. The sophisticated environmental suits that protected the bug soldiers from new. Busan's atmosphere developed mysterious leaks. Metal components corroded faster than they should have. Electronics sparked and died without apparent cause. How? Kessatar asked, watching an enemy communication array collapse as its support cables snapped. Remember the caustic sap I showed? You from the weeping trees? Hyejin said. I've been collecting it for months. A few drops on metal surfaces, and it eats through anything the hegemony uses. The cubs had helped her gather that sap, thinking they were just learning about local plants. Now they understood that every nature walk had been a weapons-gathering mission. But the real terror began when the sun went down. New Busan's night hunters were normally afraid of large groups of armed aliens, but Hyejin had spent 15 years learning to communicate with them. She knew which sounds would draw them, which scents would enrage them, and which territorial boundaries would trigger their protective instincts. The mountain cats came first. Massive predators that normally avoided anything that smelled like technology or weapons. But the hegemony landing zones reeked of pheromones that Hyejin had carefully distributed. Chemical signals that told the cats that invaders were threatening. They're cubs! Mayday, mayday! Came the panicked transmission from the enemy forces. We're under attack by native wildlife. Request immediate air support. But Hyejin had planned for that too. The local bird colonies included several species that nested in the canyon walls near the landing zones. When disturbed by low-flying aircraft, they swarmed in enormous flocks that could disable engines and crack windshields. Your people are clever, Taemin said with grudging admiration. But the hegemony will adapt. They always do. Let them try, Hyejin said grimly. Every adaptation takes time, and time is on our side. She was right. The enemy began taking precautions against wildlife attacks, setting up sonic barriers and deploying automated defense systems. But that left them vulnerable to the human colonists, who emerged from hiding like ghosts in the night. The cubs accompanied their first raid 3 days after the invasion began. They moved through the forest with Hyejin and a team of colonial marines, approaching an enemy supply depot under cover of darkness. Remember what I taught you about the moonfish? Hyejin whispered as they crept through the undergrowth. Move, like you belong here. Don't fight the environment, work with it. Velnara and Kessatar proved to be natural guerrilla fighters. Their Kethmori senses allowed them to spot enemy sentries before the humans could, while their natural stealth kept them invisible in the shadows. The raid itself was swift and surgical. The team destroyed supplies, sabotaged equipment, and vanished back into the forest before the enemy could respond. No heroic last stands or dramatic speeches, just professional soldiers doing their job with deadly efficiency. That's how humans really fight? Velnara asked afterward. She seemed disappointed by the lack of glory. When we have to, Hyejin confirmed. Honor is a luxury we can't afford when our families are threatened. The hegemony came here to exterminate us, so we're going to hurt them until they leave. The psychological warfare was just as devastating as the physical attacks. Hegemony soldiers began reporting strange sounds in the night, equipment that moved when no one was watching, and the constant feeling of being observed by unseen eyes. They're starting to crack, reported Jin A, the colony's chief communications officer. Intercepted. Transmissions show increasing requests for medical evacuation due to stress disorders. Hyejin nodded with satisfaction. Fear is a weapon too. Make them afraid to sleep, afraid to eat, afraid to breathe our air. Eventually they'll decide that conquering New Busan isn't worth the cost. But the hegemony wasn't ready to give up yet. When their ground forces proved ineffective, they began orbital bombardment of suspected human strongholds. That was when Hyejin revealed her final lesson to the cubs. Sometimes, she said, watching enemy fire rain down from the sky. The best defense is making your enemy destroy what they came to conquer. She had mapped every geological weak point on the continent. When hegemony orbital strikes hit those carefully selected targets, they triggered landslides, floods, and seismic events that made large areas of the planet uninhabitable. "You're destroying your own world," Taemin said in horror as they watched. A major river changed course after an orbital strike triggered a controlled rockslide. "Better a wounded world than a dead one," Hyojin replied. "The planet will heal. My people won't come back from extinction." The cubs began to understand that human warfare wasn't just about fighting enemies. It was about denying them everything they wanted, making victory so costly that defeat became preferable. "We're not just defending our territory," Kessatar realized. "We're making it worthless to them." "Now you're learning," Hyojin said with pride. "The hegemony came here for a habitable world they could colonize. Instead, they're finding a nightmare that fights back and gets worse every day they stay." By the end of the first week, enemy morale was breaking. Troops refused orders, equipment failures cascaded through their supply lines, and the native ecosystem seemed actively hostile to their presence. The cubs watched their human teacher coordinate it all with cold precision. She never celebrated the enemy's suffering or took joy in their defeats. This was simply what needed to be done to protect her family. "Is this what it means to be human?" Velnara asked quietly. "Part of it," Hyojin said. "We're not naturally violent. But when someone threatens what we love, we become the most dangerous thing in the universe. A species with nothing left to lose." The lesson was almost complete. The cubs had learned patience and observation from their human teacher. Now they were learning about the terrible price of pushing humanity too far. The message came through on an emergency frequency, transmitted in clear text so everyone could hear it. The voice belonged to a hegemony field commander, and it carried the harsh clicking accent of his insectoid species. "Human colonists of New Busan," the alien said. "You have fought bravely, but your resistance is futile. Surrender now, and we will grant mercy to your young. Continue to resist, and we will show no quarter to anyone." Hyojin listened to the transmission with the cubs, pressed close beside her. Captain Taemin monitored secondary channels, tracking enemy communications and troop movements. "It's a bluff," he said quietly. "Their casualties are mounting and they're running low on supplies. This is desperation, not strength." But Hyojin's face had gone cold and still. "No," she said in a voice like winter ice. "It's a mistake." The cubs had learned to read human emotions over the past months. Right now, their teacher smelled like death and fury. Something had changed in the last few seconds. Something that made the air itself feel dangerous. "What do you mean?" Velnara asked carefully. "They threatened children," Hyojin said simply. "My children, your children, all children." She stood up and walked to her communication console. When she spoke, her voice was broadcast on every frequency, reaching every human settlement on the planet and every hegemony unit in the system. "This is Dr. Hyojin Park, speaking for the human colony of New Busan," she said calmly. "You have just made a threat against our young. This was your final mistake." The transmission ended. For a moment, the forest around them was completely silent. Then Hyojin began giving orders. "Jin A, activate Protocol Omega. All colonies, all research stations, everyone with access to the biodome controls." "Confirmed," came the reply. "Protocol Omega is active." The cubs didn't understand what was happening, but Captain Taemin did. His yellow eyes went wide with shock as he monitored the communications traffic. "What have you done?" he whispered. "Something I hoped I'd never have to do," Hyojin said. She was accessing systems the cubs had never seen before, pulling up maps and data files marked with warning symbols. "For 15 years, I've been studying this planet's ecosystem. Every plant, every animal, every microorganism, I know exactly. How they all fit together. She paused, looking at the cubs with an expression of deep sadness. And I know exactly how to break it all apart. What followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The human colonists didn't just fight the hegemony invasion, they turned the entire planet into a weapon. The carefully balanced ecosystem that Hyejin had spent years studying began to collapse in controlled cascades. Pollinating insects died off, causing food plants to fail. Soil microbes were poisoned, making the ground itself toxic. River systems were contaminated with engineered bacteria that made the water undrinkable. "You're killing your own world," Taemin said in horror. "I'm sterilizing it," Hyejin corrected. "Everything I'm doing can be reversed with the right treatments, but it will take decades and detailed knowledge of exactly what was done. Knowledge that only we possess." The cubs watched in fascination and terror as their gentle teacher revealed the full scope of human ruthlessness. She wasn't just making the planet uninhabitable for the hegemony, she was making it worthless to anyone who might try to conquer it in the future. "If you can't have it, no one can," Velnara said, beginning to understand. "The hegemony came here for a garden world they could colonize," Hyejin said. "Instead, they're going to get a wasteland that will take centuries to restore, and every day they stay here, the damage gets worse. The enemy tried to adapt, but there was no adapting to total ecosystem collapse. Their air filtration systems couldn't handle the toxic spores that now filled the atmosphere. Their food supplies became contaminated with engineered parasites. Even their sealed bases weren't safe from the microscopic weapons that Hyejin had unleashed. "Please," came another transmission from the hegemony commander. His voice was weaker now, tinged with desperation. "We can negotiate. We can find terms acceptable to both sides." "You threatened our children," Hyejin replied coldly. "There are no acceptable terms." The cubs had learned about human patience and human cunning. Now they were learning about human vengeance. It was terrible and implacable, a force that would pursue enemies across space and time until justice was served. "How long can you keep this up?" Captain Taemin asked. "As long as necessary," Hyejin said. "The automated systems will continue the contamination process for years if needed, and we have backup plans within backup plans. The hegemony can choose to leave now while some of their people are still alive, or they can stay and watch them all die slowly." But the most terrifying part wasn't the biological warfare itself. It was how efficiently the humans were coordinating it all. 15 years of careful research had prepared them for this moment. Every colonist knew their role, every research station had its assigned targets, and every backup system was ready to activate if the primary ones failed. "Your people," Taemin said slowly. "They planned for this possibility. All of you." "We hoped it would never be necessary," Hyejin said. "But yes, we planned for it. Humans don't just survive, Captain. We prepare." The cubs saw their first casualty of the bioweapon attack 3 days later. A hegemony patrol that had been caught in the open when the atmospheric toxins reached critical levels. The insectoid soldiers lay dead in their environmental suits, killed by organisms too small to see. "Is this what victory looks like?" Kessatar asked quietly. "No," Hyejin said. "This is what protection looks like. Victory will be when they leave and never come back." She knelt down to the cubs' level, her expression gentle despite the devastation. "Around them. Remember this," she said softly. "Remember that we tried to be peaceful first. We offered them mercy, tried to find solutions that didn't require violence. But when they threatened children, when they made it clear that they would show no mercy to innocents, we showed them what humans become when pushed beyond all limits." The lesson was almost complete. The cubs had learned about human patience, human cunning, and human ruthlessness. But the final lesson was still to come. "What happens now?" Velnara asked. "Now we wait," Hyejin said. "And we let them choose. They can leave our world and never return, or they can stay and learn why humans are the only species that has never been successfully conquered." The hegemony fleet remained in orbit, but their commanders were beginning to understand that they faced something unprecedented. Not just a species that fought back, but one that was willing to destroy paradise itself rather than let enemies take it. The cubs watched and learned, absorbing lessons that would shape the rest of their lives. They were witnessing the birth of a legend, the story of how a small human colony faced impossible odds and chose to burn down heaven rather than surrender it to hell. The hegemony fleet left New Busan on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after they had arrived. Their departure was quiet and quick, without ceremony or final threats. They simply collected their surviving ground forces and jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a world that had taught them the true cost of threatening human children. Hye-jin watched them go from her observation post. The cubs pressed close beside her. The planet around them was wounded but not dead. Already she could see signs of recovery beginning as the emergency protocols shut down and the ecosystem started to heal. "It's over?" Velnara asked quietly. "This part is," Hye-jin confirmed. "But they'll tell others what happened here. The story will spread throughout hegemony space and beyond." Captain Taemin approached from the communication station, moving carefully on his still-healing leg. "Kethmori rescue ships have entered the outer system," he reported. "My people have finally come for us." The cubs should have been excited. They were going home after months of exile, but instead, they seemed subdued, almost sad. "Will we see you again?" Kessatar asked Hye-jin. "Probably not," she said honestly. "Your people and mine live very different lives, but you'll remember what you learned here, won't you?" "Everything," Velnara promised. "We'll remember everything." Over the next few days, the cubs helped Hye-jin begin the long process of planetary restoration. The knowledge she had used to poison New Busan could also heal it, but it would take time and careful work. "Why did you really do it?" Captain Taemin asked her one evening as they watched the sunset from her research station. "The biological warfare, I mean. You could have evacuated, found another world." Hye-jin was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. "Because someone has to draw the line," she said finally. "Someone has to say this far and no farther. The hegemony has conquered dozens of worlds, enslaved or exterminated billions of beings. If we had run, they would have done the same thing to the next colony and the next one after that." She looked at the cubs, who were playing with some of the local animals that had emerged from hiding as the toxins cleared. "But mostly, I did it because they threatened children. My children. Your children. All children everywhere. Some things are worth burning the universe for." When the Kethmori rescue ships finally landed, their crews were amazed by what they found. Instead of traumatized survivors, they discovered a functioning colony that had successfully defended itself against overwhelming odds. The humans were tired but unbroken, already working to repair the damage from their desperate last resort. Admiral Jun-ho, the commander of the rescue fleet, spent hours debriefing Captain Taemin about what had happened. The cubs listened from nearby, absorbing every word. "This is unprecedented," the admiral said finally. "A small colonial population defeating a major hegemony invasion force? How is this possible?" "They didn't defeat them in battle," Taemin explained. "They made victory too expensive to achieve. The humans turned their own world into a weapon and threatened to use it until nothing was left worth conquering." "Barbaric," one of the admiral's advisors muttered. "Effective," Taemin corrected sharply. "And necessary. The hegemony showed no mercy, so the humans showed none in return." The cubs exchanged glances. Their father was defending the human methods, seeing them as legitimate tactics rather than savage barbarism. When it came time to leave, Hye-jin walked them to the landing site where the Kethmori shuttle waited. Captain Taemin had already said his goodbyes, but the cubs lingered. "Will you be lonely here?" Velnara asked. "For a while," Hye-jin admitted. But New Busan is my home, and someone needs to make sure the restoration process goes smoothly. Besides, she smiled, I have my research to keep me busy. She knelt down, to their level one last time. Remember what you learned here. Not just the tactics and strategies, but the principles behind them. Patience before action, understanding before judgment, protection of the innocent above all else. We will, Kessatar promised solemnly. And remember that strength isn't just about fighting, Hyejin continued. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose not to fight. Sometimes it's offering mercy to an enemy who doesn't deserve it. And sometimes it's being willing to sacrifice everything for those you love. The cubs hugged her tightly, breathing in her scent one last time. Then they walked to the shuttle where their father waited. As the ship lifted off, Velnara pressed her face to the window, watching Hyejin grow smaller and smaller until she was just a tiny figure standing alone in the vast wilderness. She looks so small, Kessatar said sadly. She's not small, Captain Tae-min said firmly. She's the most dangerous being I've ever met, and the most honorable. The journey back to Kethmori space took several weeks. During that time, the cubs told their story to anyone who would listen. The other passengers and crew members were fascinated by their account of human warfare and the strange woman who had defeated an entire invasion fleet. Is it true that she talked to animals? Asked Lieutenant Yun-Su, one of the younger officers. She talked to everything, Velnara said proudly. Plants, animals, even the planet itself. She understood them all. And when the bad aliens threatened children, she made the whole world fight back, Kessatar added. Every tree, every bug, every drop of water became a weapon. The stories spread throughout the ship, and from there throughout the Kethmori fleet. By the time they reached home, everyone had heard about the human researcher who had taught their cubs patience and shown them the true meaning of protective fury. The cubs' return to Kethmori space created a sensation. Their people were used to stories of glorious battles and honorable defeats. But this was something new, a tale of victory through intelligence, preparation, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for family. Within a year, both cubs had entered the Kethmori Military Academy. But they brought with them ideas that revolutionized their people's approach to warfare. Instead of charging headfirst into battle, they taught their classmates to study their enemies first. Instead of relying solely on speed and strength, they emphasized the importance of patience and planning. Your cubs are different, Admiral Junho told Captain Tae-min during a formal ceremony marking their graduation. They think like warriors, but they plan like scholars. They learned from the best teacher in the galaxy, Tae-min replied proudly. Years passed. Velnara and Kestar rose through the ranks of the Kethmori military, each becoming leaders in their own right. They never forgot the lessons they had learned on New Busan, and they passed those lessons on to others. When the cubs, now adults with cubs of their own, finally achieved their dream of commanding their own ships, they requested permission to visit New Busan. The journey was approved as a diplomatic mission, strengthening ties between the Kethmori Empire and the human colonies. They found Hyejin exactly where they had left her, older and grayer, but still studying the world around, her with endless curiosity. The planet had fully recovered from the biological warfare, and new species were evolving to fill the ecological niches that had been temporarily emptied. "Look at you," she said with pride as the grown cubs, now Captain Velnara and Commander, Kestar, stood before her in their military uniforms. "I always knew you would do great things." "We learned from the best," Velnara said simply. They spent a week together, walking the same trails where the cubs had first learned to see the world through human eyes. Hyejin showed them her latest research, and they told her about the changes they had brought to Kethmori military doctrine. "The galaxy is safer because of what you taught us," Kessatar said on their last evening together. Our people no longer see patience as weakness. We understand that the greatest victories come from preparation, not just courage. And if anyone threatens children, Velnara added with a smile that showed her fangs, we know exactly what humans taught us to do about it. Hyojin laughed, the sound carrying across the alien forest that had become her home. Good, she said. Some lessons should never be forgotten. As the Kethmori ships departed once again, Hyojin stood in the same spot, where she had watched them leave years before. But this time she wasn't alone. Other species had heard the story of New Busan, and young beings from across the galaxy now came to learn from the human who had defeated an empire with patience, planning, and the absolute refusal to surrender. What she loved. The cubs had learned patience from the human and power from her battles. But most importantly, they had learned that the strongest families are the ones you choose, and the greatest victories are the ones that protect the innocent. In the end, that was the lesson that changed the galaxy.